Hi, this is Jackie Miller, your host of Out of Crazy Town, your guide to divorcing a narcissist. Today, I have back on the show Dr. Caroline Giroux, Doctor of Psychiatry and Professor of Psychiatry at UC Davis. Previously, Dr. Giroux was on the show, and we were discussing the devastating effects of gaslighting. Well, she is back today to discuss what we can do to be more resilient after suffering narcissistic abuse and enduring the family court system. Today, she takes a deep dive. It's a very important topic, and she gives us really useful information on what we can do to not just survive, but to move on and be more whole and achieve happiness and take our lives, our minds, and our bodies back after suffering narcissistic abuse. Please listen in to this important episode with Dr. Caroline Giroux. Hello, Dr. Caroline Giroux. Thank you so much for coming back to Out of Crazy Town, your guide to divorcing a narcissist.
Thank you, Jackie. Good to see you.
I'm really thrilled that you're back because if listeners aren't aware, you came on the podcast one other time, and the title of that episode was The Devastating Effects of Gaslighting, which we could have done a 4-part series on, right? Gaslighting is just, we could go on and on about that. But I love that you and I touch base again because we decided to shift gears just a little. And we're going to talk about all the trauma that happens in this population and with this audience, but giving them tools. And you are the utmost expert on how to do that. One, I just want to remind the audience because you are MD, a doctor of psychiatry. You are also professor of psychiatry at UC Davis, and you specialize in trauma, right?
Correct.
And, just reading through lots of stuff, different bios about you, I mean, you have really gained expertise in so many areas of trauma that span so many demographics. I mean, everything from refugees to you name it. I've seen you give talks on adverse child experiences. So I just want the audience to know, this is the expert. And unfortunately, you are also forged by fire with the rest of us, and that I know you've endured your own targeted trauma and endured the family court system and the institutional trauma there. So, folks, we're going to talk about, and Dr. Giroux is going to lead us through things that have more to do with being resilient and having sort of some tools in your toolkit to be resilient from the trauma endured going through this. And so I just wanted to ask you first, specific to you, why are you so passionate about giving victim survivors in this arena tools?
Yes, that is a great question. I feel like as human beings, we need to not only understand why things happen to us, but also how can we make things better for others? It is so painful going through any trauma, loss, adversity, serious medical condition that we really want others to avoid going through that. And if they go through that, what can they take from our experience to actually transform it and thrive? And this is really what has given me meaning and a sense of purpose over the past several years. It's also about giving back to others who have helped me and inspired me, giving to others and continue that chain of, heightened consciousness and better access to wisdom and resilience.
I couldn't agree more. Educating ourselves on, what happened, how we can get better. And then you're right. It's like you just can't help but want to run back and grab the others or say, here's what I learned, and hopefully this will help you. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with this audience because I've had so much feedback lately. I don't know what's going on in the universe that's making everyone reach out right now, but they are just letting me know how helpful this is. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise. And, you and I had exchanged some emails on this topic, and I was trying to make bullet points just so you know. And you guys, her writing is so impactful and so eloquent and so that I'm actually going to read something she wrote in the email because I started to make bullet points and I thought I'm screwing this up. Like I'm robbing the people of the opportunity. I'm just going to read a little blurb if you don't mind. And then I want to ask you about it. So for anyone who has had the courage to leave a toxic, abusive relationship scaffolded with coercive control by a person with a very problematic personality, thinking that liberation is right around the corner after years of holding one's breath, the shock of battling yet another entity, the legal system and all its players, on top of suffering the attack on one's loving bond to our children is immense. And then I'm going to read more later, but you're right. You have family and friends that want you to leave. You know you should leave, and you cannot imagine what's around the corner. in the family court system? Like, what are your thoughts?
That's a great question. And I am not the only one in that situation. And you know it too. And by the way, you're kind of like me, a torchbearer as well. You are trying to make this world better with what you do. So I want to commend you on that. I feel like it's still a shock, after 3+ years of still being through that cogwheel. It just doesn't make sense. It's just so procedural and disconnected from what we are at our core and what we want out of life and what we want to give, that it's really hard to reconcile with our values. I don't know what to say other than, you made the decision at the time based on what you thought was best for you, for your family, but we never know what's happening, what can it lead to. We never know what to expect. And I think United States is a little different also in terms of the culture and the legal system. I mean, in Scandinavian countries, a divorce is a piece of paper and a signature, It's not a battlefield like here. Here, it can be such a long, agonizing process. The legal system is like a corporation. It's, the system benefits from people being at each other's throat and fighting over kids' finances and their own dignity. So, and once you're caught in it, it's hard to get out of it because you're thinking, wow, I put so much money in already. Am I going to give up now? Maybe I'm close to reaching my goal or getting that outcome, which is minimizing the damage. We don't want any blood casualties, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. So it's really hard to know when to stop or when to say that's enough. And also it's very disempowering. Once you're in it, you're told what to do, where to go. You have to go to mediation, to custody evaluator, and see a professional. There are these court orders. You're completely disempowered. So that's a little bit scary, right? To say the least, because it's also a black hole. It's like one thing will lead to the next, to the next, to the next. There's this domino effect also. And, if you're in court with an ex-partner who tends to like arguing and being in conflict, then everything might be an excuse for a battle, a word, or everything can be weaponized. And this can be endless because, of course, narcissists, as you probably know, thrive in the legal court system. It's adversarial. It's showtime for them. I would advise our people who listen today to know what they're getting themselves into and actually prepare themselves, because it's not impossible to go through that without, suffering too much. But I think we need to know what we're getting ourselves into. I think we need to make an informed decision. But I would say it needs to be more common knowledge what it entails to separate from a spouse. And then people who want to end a marriage, then they can know what to prepare ahead of time before filing,
then you add that other layer on top of divorcing a disordered personality who's hell-bent on using the system, and weaponizing it against you. And in fact, you had also said something to me that just hit home, where you basically said that you had the realization that what was happening was basically psychoterror. Kind of the way I look at it as well, is the ultimate goal for this person, disordered individual X that you're divorcing, who's weaponized this whole system against you, it's just another form of mind control to keep you trapped in that high state of stress so that you mess up, so that you are basically debilitated and you can't function. And so, you have pointed that out to me, and it's so true. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. And like you said, not only having a heads up of what divorce is about, but understanding that is their goal. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yes. And that's another area where I was a little bit naive. I had seen the psychotherapy. I had experienced it. That is what had made me want to leave. But would have never guessed it would have amplified after that, because it is their whole purpose. This gives them a sense of existing or a relevance to being, to terrorize others, to suffocate others. So if you're leaving a relationship, then what are they going to do? So they continue to go after you, to make these false allegations, to make these false declarations, and manipulating professionals. So I would have never anticipated that. So that part I was really naive about. And yes, the psychotherapy doesn't end. And if it's that bad, it's because that's who they are and they want to continue that. So, but when you leave a situation like that, when you've suffered emotional, spiritual, psychological, intellectual abuse, name it, financial abuse and oppression for that many years, you're in such a state of vulnerability that it's even hard to think clearly. All you think about is, I need to make it to another day. I need to find an escape strategy. I need to protect myself, my children. And so there's no energy left or mental space to plan for the other steps or the exacerbation of the narcissistic abuse. So we're on survival mode. And like you said, yes, they keep us in a heightened state of arousal. This is what the listeners need to also, and viewers need to know, is really, it's all about the trauma response. Living with an abusive partner is a form of trauma, and we live in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's for survival. But when we do that, we cannot think clearly. We sacrifice our ability to respond effectively. And that's why having a good toolkit with self-regulation skills is important, because not only these, what I call 4Fs, fight, flight, freeze, faint responses, make us, less able to think clearly. There's an underlying stigma that goes with people who react because they're in a fight, flight mode. They're labeled as crazy in our system, still in our society, especially the legal system. So that's another reason we need to make sure we can ground ourselves for reacting, always pausing before responding to an email, to a text, or to an absolutely outrageous accusation. We really need to be, like you once told me, be a stone or a rock or something like that. I have no reaction, don't engage. I can't say it often enough. I often fell into that trap, but now I've learned my lesson.
And would you agree? Because I want to both validate what people feel when that's happening to them, but then also, again, educate them to your point and help you see what's really at play here, what the dynamics really are, what their goal really is, because they are so good at using the exact words on the exact topic and accusing you of just the perfect thing to get you to respond. Their fuel, their oxygen is getting you to respond. And I get how hard it is not to respond a lot of times, because they are freaking good. They know exactly what to say.
Yes. And, I've had many years of experiences and observations to figure out that their goal is to really use us as all kinds of resources, whether it's, intellectual or social, like status. They pick partners usually who have super traits because it reflects well on them. We're providing other resources as well, like emotional resources, because they cannot admit or own their own stuff, whether it's shame, envy, rage. They project that onto us. We talked about that in the gaslighting podcast, I think, with the projective identification. But when they get a reaction out of us, because it means they don't need to react. We do it for them. So we're basically emotional processors. So that's why we really need to just know what belongs to us and leave it as that, and just ignore their attempts to dump their stuff on us. That's not ours. So yes to non-engaging, yes to parallel communication. They will find the words, like you said, because they have ammunitions. They know, they gather data all these years about us, and they know exactly where our sensitive spots are. They know where to push the buttons. So we really need to be careful and just see that as an attempt to get us to lose it. And we cannot. We should not. And if we do, we should have self-compassion. It happens to everyone. But once we know that, this is what they're doing, I'm not engaging. I'm not playing this game. I have my focus, and this is the court order. This is my kids' well-being. I'm going to focus on the question at hand and keep repeating my statement and ignore his attempt to, or her attempt to, fall into that trap.
That is fascinating. And so I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So if I'm hearing you right, it's like they cannot emotionally process. They're emotionally, I don't know, sort of stunted, or they literally can project, almost like handing you, here's my ball of crap. Yes. I have this big ball of crap I'm holding. I'm not going to hold it. I'm going to hand it to you and then watch you lose your mind. And you're the one that's going to react. And I'm just going to let you do all of that. So is that then part of the projection?
Yes, because they have very mature personalities and they are developmentally arrested, and they cannot take ownership for their stuff. They have too much shame. They cannot acknowledge mistakes, even minor mistakes. And therefore, they have others bear the burden of that. That's why they are in relationships. It's like vampirizing another person. It's another way to be a vampire. So yes, you're absolutely right. That's it. They basically hand us unconsciously, energetically crap for us to pick up after
Wow.
and clean the mess for them.
It is something we've talked about before, but yeah, they cannot accept any shame. So let's talk about then some of the tools that people can have to become more resilient, because it is something I am so passionate about. I love talking about the education of why and how things happen, but more and more that I'm in this industry, and you and I have talked about this, I have realized, because the battleground, the prize is your mind, is your own mind, and they're battling to continue to control it. Basically, that's where you can get your win, is taking your own mind and your own emotions back. And so that's why I'm so glad we're talking about this. So what is the first thing you have to say on this topic?
Self-regulation, like I alluded to earlier, is really important. Just first of all, calming our stress response system. I have a great friend who's a psychologist who talked about gentle living actually over the weekend. She said, "Oh, by the way, I'm practicing gentle living today. I'm journaling and I'm making pesto and I'm relaxing." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing something similar. I'm journaling too. I'm cooking chili, not pesto." But I thought that's so sweet, gentle living, to really learn to self-soothe and do gentle things for ourselves. So that's important, because that's going to bring us back to a state that is resting, restorative, recharged, regulated, calm. So we need to find that way, whatever it is, to access this inner calm in us that we all have, but we forget we have because of the piles of, stressors around us, right? So we need to find a way to just pause and be in the moment. I call that the mindfulness menu. Mindfulness is another word for being in the moment. Have a list of things that really makes you feel like you live the moment as if it were eternal. It makes you feel like full of joy, compassion, gratitude, love, and whatever that is, do more of and expand on that. So for me, I found my own ways. I find that walking every day, 30 minutes in my neighborhood with beautiful trees, and this makes me feel good. Journaling, doing laps in my pool, because I feel like when we are in our bodies, when we do something with our hands, with our bodies, whether it's yoga, whether it's running, gardening, we're not so much in our heads anymore with all the ruminations and all the storylines that we have and the distorted thinking. So it's really important to have some of that. And laps, for instance, or walking or cutting vegetables mindfully, it's a repetitive act. It's not mechanical. It's repetitive because we do it, but we're with intention every time. If it's mechanical, we kind of do that robotically and we're no longer in the moment. But if it's repetitive, again, it can help us kind of self-hypnotize in a good way and again regulate. There are countless ways to do that. I also like to use the framework or the 4 elements, doing something to balance the 4 elements in your life: water, fire, air, and earth, right? So what makes you close to earth? What helps you connect with the wind? By deep breathing, singing, humming. Warmth or fire would be connections, having a candle, warm tea, and of course, water could be a hot bath, could be a cold shower, could be dancing in the rain. There, again, countless possibilities. And this brings us back to the essence of life. And we have all we need around us. We just need to be creative sometimes. It doesn't have to be complicated. But that's one example. So it's very important to self-regulate. Talking to someone, a therapist, also can help us. It's important to process our difficult emotions when we have them, when they're too heavy. And a support system, of course, is important. We need to be with people who affirm us, who see us for who we are, who appreciate us. And spirituality, I mean by that connecting with the sense of belonging to a bigger whole, whether it's nature, the rest of humanity. And in order to access that, we can practice gratitude, we can have compassion towards ourselves or others, and cultivate joy. So these are only, a few examples, but it doesn't have to be within a specific religion. But we are all spiritual beings that are living a human experience right now. So that's important, and that has helped me a lot. And also cultivating acceptance, which doesn't mean agreeing with the situation, but just seeing it for what it is. It is what it is right now. Okay, if I accept it, then therefore I stop waiting for it to be different. Therefore, I free up some mental space and energy. to do something else.
I love that. So I stop waiting for it to be different. That is so profound and such a great way to say that, because I talk about radical acceptance a lot, and the fact that it doesn't mean you like it, doesn't mean it's okay, but it is what it is. But I like that it's like it's not going to change in 3 minutes from now. It still is what it is, and so you can stop waiting for it to be different. You can. It's okay. And then turn your mind to using tools like things that you have just mentioned. I love that. Stop waiting for it to be different.
And other ways would be to transcending an experience by rising above it or transforming it. So I do a lot of narrative therapy with my patients and also in my own life. So writing a story about something, it restores the sense of wholeness and dignity. And it gives the person the full control of the story, of how it is told. And it can help create a sense of beauty too, trying to find the beauty in the adversity. But what's the good that came out of that? I've learned about myself a lot. I've learned about others, about human condition. Others are going through suffering, and it connects me. I've learned to set better boundaries. Really putting that in writing can be very grounding and another mindful activity, but also another way to self-reflect and take ownership for our life.
I love this example of doing this. Would you be even more specific? So literally get a pen and paper. And what do you mean by narrative? And like, what kind of story would you write? I'd love for you to get like really specific on this practice. I think this is super cool.
It's important to write about the emotional experience with trauma, not just the fact, because it's the emotional experience that will help us heal. Actually, there are studies by Pennebaker that show that there are some benefits. And there were studies done with medical students who, after a flu vaccine, had a higher antibody titers if they wrote about their emotional experiences, as opposed to the control group who wrote about just neutral stuff. So in other words, their immune system was more effective, more responsive after doing that writing exercise. So it affects our whole being, basically our physiology. So writing about the emotions as a way to purge, as a way to make sense, but also, as a way to self-validate, to understand ourselves better. So we gain some self-awareness and we grow from that. And we can also write about things we're thankful for. So that's another way to, feel better. But there are various approaches, but I would say journaling about difficult emotional experiences, about things that make us thankful, and also even about our dreams. And I do that. I journal about my dreams as well, because dreams can have a key to a problem or a dilemma. We might not know it when we write it down, but we can go back to the writing later on because we can connect the dots. Other things happened or a theme was recurrent enough that it got our attention. And then we have a deeper understanding. So I think there are a lot of possibilities with the narrative approaches and the writing. And narration can also happen verbally, right? So we can share a story orally to others, and it can bring people together. So it's also another way to heal, because when you share your story, others might identify and feel less alone. And that's one thing that this whole experience taught me, is the importance of breaking the sense of aloneness, whether it's through group therapy, whether it's through sharing stories, hearing stories, but also telling our own.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And I know that you recently, because you write a blog, and you recently did a blog on journaling. Am I right? And I know
Right. Yes.
I was going to tell the audience. Now, I found it just by going to your LinkedIn page. So you guys go to Caroline Giroux, Giroux.
Yes, I have a blog. It's Sweet blog post. For like the word, the French word for soul. Sweet because it sounds like home, sweet home.
Oh.
And I started that a year ago when I moved into my new home, which is a big part of my healing, right? Reappropriation of my life, so to speak, after 2 years of renting and moving, feeling like an unhoused person in my own life, right? So to speak.
A nomad.
And I started that, and I also wrote on the mindful benefits of daily journaling, and I can send you the link. It's on Journal of Psychiatry Reform.
Oh, that'd be great. So I can put that in the show notes, and a couple of other comments on that. I mean, yes, you're right. This whole process and the abusers really setting out to isolate you. You're right. So anything you can do to reconnect and break that feeling of isolation. And I am so big into the physiology behind these things. Like you said, it boosts your immune system, and you're going in and you are rescuing your brain and your mind and your body when you do these things. And in my opinion, that is the definition of winning, when you can do those things. And it's journaling, but the impact of it is so great. The more I read, and I love you quoting studies, because the more studies that I find that just show you are taking back your power and your control when you do things, mindful things like that, it's amazing. So what else do we have? Because I know, let's see, what we talked, the self-regulation, the spirituality. What else, Dr. Giroux?
Yeah. So the sense of purpose, I talked about it a little bit. So I encourage everyone to find their own sense of purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning, but also finding your freedom. Because in this empowering process, after having depression, and then you have even more obstacles, it seems like, and you're told what to do, and it's kind of suffocating. It's important to find areas in your life that are yours, that you can call yours, that nobody will touch, that are really you, whether it's your imagination, whether it's good memories you have from the past, and really cling onto that as much as you can, or put them in the forefront of your mind. Because really, for me, I kind of got the sense at the beginning, even though I felt naive, I kind of knew deep down it would be a long process. And I thought, there's no way that I'm going to make these X years of my life only about the divorce. I knew that. I didn't want that to consume my whole life. So I made sure that I protected those areas that I had worked so hard at developing. And that includes my career, my writing, staying connected with other human beings, and my personal growth, my spirituality. So I really tried my best to check in with myself and make sure my whole day had not just been about communication with attorneys and responding to my ex or anticipating the proceedings. And I needed to put something else in my day, whether it was an outing somewhere or video call with a relative in Canada, or watching a movie, something light. So this is something I encourage everyone to do. And the legal system, it's almost an illusion. It's not our divine nature. It's not who we are at our core, at our essence, right? It is not. We've been pulled into that kind of drama. It's like a theater. At the end of the day, we just go behind the scenes and remove the costume and the makeup and then go home, So we have to see the legal battlefield as just that. And it's going to end. It's not all there is. It's a game, Unfortunately, it's can feel destructive and causes some financial hemorrhage, but it's not all there is. And we are never completely annihilated. We cannot be, because they can't take who we are at our core. So it's important to just remind ourselves of that and do whatever you need to restore your self-worth by doing mileage into another realm of your life that's untouchable, Go in exile from suffering. That's really what I was telling myself. And whether it was just like, okay, meditating, I felt like, there were some settings in my life. I felt like I'm untouchable. No, this can come reach me here. All this stuff that I don't want to deal with, I'm kind of shielded, whether it was during a group meditation or traveling or, being surrounded by loved ones. And I felt it. And I really, really was intentional in my moment and didn't want to have that contaminated. So also living with intention is important. I'm going to do this, and this will get my whole attention. Nothing else. Nothing else is going to interfere with that.
I know you had mentioned, I loved examples like you ran your first 10K. So, there, it's like you set a goal for yourself. It was running is just yours. It was something, just your goal that nothing else could touch. And I love using that example because also it's a part of, I remember a therapist taught me this, it's a part of futuring. And one of the things, we stop making plans, we stop thinking about our future, we stop making goals when we're wrapped up in this horrible, whether you are still trapped in the family court system or you're just still trapped in post-separation abuse. That again is all designed to stop you from forward progress and from being yourself and growing and healing. So I love setting goals like that just for yourself, because you're getting back to futuring, which is so important for just happiness, just everyday contentment, and making those little goals that are just yours, just for you, things that are having friends over for dinner. So making dinner plans, that's futuring. Whatever it is, a hobby, setting up, just dates to meet your friends or whatnot. But I love that example. And I think that that's exactly what it rescues you from.
Yes, I love that. Futuring. I'll remember that one. I'm a big fan of futuring. And also, in order to kind of reconnect with that, it might be helpful to go back in time pre-marriage or pre-union with the person you are separating from, and remember what were your dreams at the time and see what needs to be realized, and actualized. And so for me, for instance, is learning a third language. I'm trying to learn Spanish now. So it's always been my dream to speak different languages, and I'm like, well, I have the time now. And but we put things on hold sometimes, because other constraints, and now is the time to do that. Now is the time to really be yourself fully. And yes, it's destabilizing at first, right? Because when you had envisioned a whole life with someone and it's not happening, there's a grief also. Let's not minimize that. There's a sense of grief, of hopes and dreams, and we realize, oh my gosh, this does not turn out the way I was hoping for. And what do I do now? So it's destabilizing. It is sad. And with the legal proceedings, we don't have to deal with the emotions associated with grief. So we need to also make room for that. Some will actually suggest to have a ritual, like, having a copy of the divorce decree and bury it somewhere. It's like it brings closure and there's a new beginning, or maybe planting a tree or something, So I think it's important to do that as well. It's part of the futuring. Because if we want to bring something in our life, we need to make room for it. So what is it that we shed? What is it that we say goodbye to, physically and symbolically as well?
That is amazing. It forces you to make room for something else in your life. Yes, which is exactly what doesn't happen and what gets pushed out when we don't do those things. So, and then it just minimizes the stuff that they're trying to force you to focus on. So I don't know if you had mentioned the mind hygiene yet. I know you had mentioned you'd used the word transcendence so far, and I was wondering if you could expand more on what transcendence means. But I didn't want to skip over mind hygiene as well.
Yes. So mind hygiene, it's really about making sure that we feed our mind and body good thoughts, positive thoughts. Words carry a vibration. So there are lots of good words that I like, whether it's joy, soul, sacred, awe, gratitude, compassion, or whatever thought that lights you up. It could be visual, it could be a sound, whatever it is. So really bringing our minds to be connected with something positive, because we are wired to focus on the negative. And this is because of our reptilian brains, right? Because there were way more threats to our integrity and safety when we were hunter-gatherers. And we had to be alert and always interpret stimulus, with a negative lens. This could kill me, this could eat me, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, it's a little bit more abstract and subtle. Yes, there are threats to our egos, like someone sends us an email that's hostile or criticizing, we might get panicky, but we're not going to get killed. So we need to tone that down. We need to avoid going in overdrive of our stress systems and just practice focusing on the positive. So we need to rewire the brain towards the positive, basically. And a way to do that is reframing mistakes, not take ourselves too seriously. Learn to let go of the ego, which is just a creation anyway. It's the illusion, the ultimate illusion. We're not that. We're not what the world think of us. We're not our reputation. We're not our diplomas. We are something else. And we need to tap into that. And again, meditation, spirituality help us do that. I find that humor and self-deprecation really help me. So that's another way to rewire towards the positive. There's a great author, I can't remember her name, I think it's Judith Orloff, who said that you can basically just have statements like, oh, only me can do such big a mess. I mean, I'm the best to make messes or to say the wrong thing, or, like turn that into something glorious rather than shameful, and ultimately, it's really healing. And I try to do that more. Some people will write their resume, but with only what they call failures. But as we know, there's no such thing as a mistake or a failure, but only lessons. So we have to learn also to reframe those, mistakes as opportunities for learning. It's actually a stepping stone towards something else. We just don't know where it's going to lead us, but it's going to lead us somewhere. And it might be something beautiful. So let's zoom out. Let's not judge what we did. We just have to, okay, I'm taking ownership, then what to do next, not beat ourselves up, or not hide in shame, but really reframing that. So that's the mind hygiene. I've practiced that as well, reminding ourselves that we do the best we can with the limited information that we have at the time, and we just continue to evolve. And that's what's beautiful. I mean, if we were perfect, my gosh, that would be boring. There would be no room for expansion. But every day we can expand. That's unlimited. So that's exciting.
It is. And I think it's so encouraging to know, at least it was for me, when I started to really dig deep and study, things like neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain. I was so relieved to know that there were things I could do to heal my brain, like things I could, do sitting in my bed tonight, like when I get up in the morning. And they were the journaling, the meditating, I heard Dr. Ramani once say that this demographic of people who are victims of narcissistic abuse have some of the highest rates of rumination of any group of traumatized people. And the problem with that is, you're right, like we kind of can't get off the hamster wheel lots of times of thinking about what's happened or what they've done. Or I used to play a game with myself where I wouldn't want to go say, I'll just give this random example, a friend's daughter's graduation party. Really didn't want to go, but I love this friend dearly. And I thought, you need to get out of the house. You need to go interact. You need to go do something, but think about this. So I would go and I would make it a point to ask people as many questions about themselves and not talk about my thing as possible, just as a game to like rewire my brain, talk about something else, focus on someone else. I was sick of listening to myself talk about it, but yet the rumination is real. It's really hard to get off the hamster wheel. And yeah, so that mind hygiene of trying to reframe things, refocus, try to really look for the positive, or, just in life, or gratefulness is so powerful, I think, in helping us rewire.
I like what you did, asking questions, shifting the focus. And yes, it gets us out of what I call also the sorry go round or the worry go round kind of, so yeah, the hamster wheel too. And we tend to do that. And it could also be in response to the ex-partner's conditioning. Maybe we're containing some of their mental torture, and we have to realize, no, this is thinking, this is a creation of my mind or someone's projection. I don't need to take that. I'm saying no to that. I also call that a zip line. I'm not going to go down that zip line of negative thinking today. I'm going to go in another zip line or just stay here. I don't have to go anywhere. So you're exactly right. Noticing that is the sign of being mindful. You're observing yourself. So that's great. And yes, it changes the brain. Like you said, neuroplasticity, meditation, everything that makes us feel good will reshape our brain. Instead of having our alarm systems called the amygdala in the brain being oversized due to trauma, they will shrink, and therefore will be less sensitive and less, likely to go off easily. And we, in parallel to that, develop other areas like the corpus callosum, which is the network of fibers between the two hemispheres who help the two hemispheres communicate. So when you have that, you have a better mental flexibility. You're able to go from intuition to, analytical tasks. And so you basically rebalance the creative parts of your brain with the more like planning or, procedural part of the brain. Both are important, but we basically balance them. We're not in one side more than the other. So when we meditate, we really reshape the brain, to serve us optimally in this life.
So important, I think, for people to know that, because you're right. Like, we're basically reconnecting / rewiring our brain to work again. And it blew me away when I looked back on my own behavior at the time that and I think you tell me if I have this correct. This is what I have read, that it's basically the long-term exposure to these very high levels of cortisol, which is basically produced when you're in the stress. And like you just said, so your amygdala swells, which is the center for housing emotions, right? Like fear and anxiety. And so no wonder you get triggered by something they do, and that part of your brain is oversized, and you are having these massive feelings of fear and anxiety, and you are now physically conditioned. Like, your brain is now created in a state due to this overwhelming exposure to cortisol or stress hormones because of their abuse. So they've literally now reshaped your brain to serve them. And I know I keep saying them, but I say it because I want people to know they can take their life back, and they have control. And these even seemingly simple practices like the meditation, the journaling, actually are physically taking your brain back. And it's huge. And so I guess that's why I'm getting so passionate about it and putting an exclamation point on what you're saying, because you guys do have control and that excites me so much.
Yes, you said it really well, Jackie. And the trauma resides in our bodies. So therefore, we need the healing to happen in our bodies as well. Talk therapy is not enough. There needs to be a physical component to integrate the mind and the body, which have been disconnected because of the trauma. So bringing ourselves back into our bodies, inhabiting our bodies, making the body a temple that we treat well, eating good food, exercising, moving our body, dancing, singing, connecting with others, doing things with our hands, doing art, whatever. That's all really important.
That's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. I love that. Going on to the word you had used before, transcendence. This is one area I don't really feel like I know very well. What do you mean by transcendence?
Yes, it's a very good question. It means rising above, transcending, going above something, going beyond, basically transforming adversity into something positive for your life, for others, for the world, right? It's basically like making lemonade when life gives you lemons. So making the best out of a situation. I often ask myself that question. Let's say I'm frustrated, there's an obstacle, or there's something that's missing that I need to do something else. Say, well, what do I have to work with? And it makes us appreciate more life, and it makes us live life to the fullest. So you can, for instance, to transform or transcend an experience, do an activity like a podcast, right? To make information available to help others. You can give a speech. You can write a story, your memoir, whatever, write a paper. So you can do advocacy work. Possibilities are endless, but it's really about using the difficult experience and the way it woke you up, because difficulties are made to actually wake us up and make us more conscious. And then with that awareness, how do you translate that into wisdom that can help others? How can you use that as a motor, as a force that is towards the positive, that's not destructive or constructive? An example, I've been part of a project. There's a launch actually Friday. It's an anthology, How to Overcome Trauma in Family Law Cases. So I'll send you the information for that as well. What struck me in that collaboration, Jackie, we all have some commonalities in our stories, the other co-authors and I. I realized that if it doesn't change the outcome that we're hoping for, whether it's a reform of the family law system, whatever, or family court system, there's still something good that came out of it, because I was so inspired by these people. And I'm like, oh, together we did this. Wow. It was to me like a force. It was like just something lit up. And if we can light up an area of life together, we just demonstrated that things are possible. When we join forces, when we are inspired by each other, when we express kindness to each other. I really feel like this was a transcendental or transcending experience. Just the behind the scenes of meeting and talking about the book and supporting each other. I made friends. I made meaningful connections among this group of people. And they're all over the world.
I love that. And, I'm just thinking, so I was speaking at a support group recently, and just being in a support group, not only for your own support, but you're right, helping others, that part is just as healing, the transcendence. And so now your story is helping somewhere else. And so it could just even be as simple as a support group where you're receiving support, but you're giving it as well. And that is a very important step. Like you said, it's a step. It's another step towards a healing.
Yes. And you've offered support groups, and they're amazing. And yeah, as a co-facilitator, you can transcend an experience or a leader of a group, but also, like you said, participants can transcend the experience by helping others in the group. Absolutely.
Sure. I love it. Okay. What else? Is there anything else you want to leave people with when it comes to toolkits or tools that they can use?
Well, I kind of said it in different words, but, making sure that the rest of your life is more prominent than whatever painful stuff you're going through the legal battlefield. So making sure that it is not all there is. Remind yourself of that, because also the court is not the venue to tell your story. And a lot of people I talk to walk out frustrated from that process because, well, I didn't get to tell my truth. And this is not what happened. And then the attorneys will say, no, it doesn't matter. This is not the judge. The judge won't care about that. It won't change the decision. But to restore our dignity, we still need to make sure our truth is heard. And we have to find other venues for that. We have to, make sure that there's something else that's prominent that matters. Yeah, supportive network, my creativity, etc. So, and just friends who sit with you without offering necessarily an advice or solution, but just sit with the pain. Often we just need someone to acknowledge the suffering, not just trying to fix it. It's there and I have to live it and it's going to go away, but it can't be dismissed. It can't be, rushed into healing. We just need people who are able to tolerate that. And it's not always easy.
And I had to read one more thing that you wrote just because, again, I'm just love your writing so much, but back to your point about the family court system, it's not the place you're going to get your justice. You had written, as disheartening as it is, the family court system is not the venue to tell your story and feel whole again. It is procedural. It is an idiotic creation of our ego-driven societies, and it is remote from the divine element of our humanness. There are so many counterintuitive elements and illogical rules. Make sure the rest of your life is more prominent than the legal battlefield. Like, mic drop. You're just like, it's just so well said, Caroline. And you're so right. And I've often said, and I don't say this to clients in the beginning because you need to meet people where they're at. So usually this is like farther down our relationship. I will often see a big shift in their case when they start doing what you just said. When they start, it's just a weird phenomenon. I can't articulate exactly why that is. You just sort of have to intuitively understand it. But when they start focusing almost on other areas of their life, and don't get me wrong, I understand you have to document, you have to, you have to get the right attorney. I help with all that. I get all that. But yes, you're right. Like, anything you can do to not make that your whole life. I don't know why.
Yes.
I see a big shift happen in their own cases and things start progressing. And again, it's a phenomenon I can't explain. It's an observation I feel like I have to point out.
Wow, you're a very keen observer. Thank you for that. Yes, and that I know it's hard to explain, but at the same time, that means we work towards what's in our best interest and what's according to our mission, our life mission, ultimately. Instead of just being reactive, we are actually going in the direction of our life, and that's important to not lose sight of that. Yeah. So once we're able to turn off the noise, the mental noise, then we can invest energy more wisely.
Sat and thought about and hypothesized as to why it is many times. And I don't know if it's you are taking your energy back and it's no longer available for this energy vampire, which you would, kind of use the word vampire before, and it is. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot of dynamics at play there, but I just wanted to point that out. And so, Caroline Giroux, thank you so much for coming on and talking through all of these super important topics that people need to have as they're, going through this very difficult journey. It is validating to hear, not only what you went through, but pointing out how difficult it is, and then having toolkits and knowing that somebody else has used these tools and somebody as intelligent as you and educated as you, knows that they're tried and true.